Hi, this is Glenn Morgan, and if you're watching this video, you're probably holding your student's progress report in your hand and going, what the heck am I looking at? This doesn't look like any progress report my kid has brought home before. Well, we've made a shift to a standards-based gradebook this semester, and as you know, here in San Diego Unified, our student information system, which includes an online gradebook, is Pearson PowerSchool. Now, let me just start off by saying that PowerSchool is not the ideal platform for this because it has a couple universal defaults that we simply were not able to get rid of when we display grades online and when we print out a progress report. So the purpose of this video is to walk you through how to interpret your student's progress report, and in a few minutes I think you're going to feel much better. But let's just jump right into it. First things first, you're going to notice this is a sample student's progress report. I blocked out the identifying information. The first thing that PowerSchool does, which I do not like, is that it automatically calculates a final grade based on any number or letter grade you put into it. And as we know from conversations we've had throughout the year, it is really not fair to grade people as they're learning how to do something. Yes, there's a certain point where you need to attach a grade, but grades tend to obscure the real purpose of school, which is learning. You know, if all a kid cares about is, you know, do I currently have an A in the class, that anxiety is going to override any conversation about, like, you know, what am I actually learning? So as you can see, this student does have a letter grade and a percentage calculated here. The first thing I don't like about Pearson PowerSchool is that it actually gives you two final grades, which can be really confusing. So let's take a look at the first is P3, and this stands for progress reporting period, the progress reporting period we're in, and you can see that there is a letter grade and a percentage, as much as I would not like there to be one. People really focus in on that. But if you want to know what your kid is currently learning in the class, or sorry, what currently their grade is calculated to be in the class, it's always the S number. In this case, we're in semester 2, and you can see the calculated grade here. The P number is what that student has earned based on assignments just given out in the current grading, the progress reporting period, which is the third quarter, the progress 3, okay? And this number will actually lock in place once we get to the 9-week mark, and then the S2 number will continue to change as more and more assignments are entered. Which actually brings me to an important distinction that you probably already noticed in PowerSchool, the distinction between formative assessment and summative assessment. So, first things first, all of these quintile scores you see are simply measurements of your student's performance on specific standards. A 5 means a student has exceeded the standard. A 4 means the student has met the standard. A 3 means the student is approaching the standard. A 2 means there's limited evidence. And we just skipped to 0 to show that the student either wasn't assessed or they scored so low that it wasn't even limited evidence, okay? Now, the important thing to know is that these do not count in the final grade calculation. They're there merely for feedback and for data, and so the student can be informed as to this is where you stand at the standard at this point. And actually, all of these came out of one single assessment I gave at the beginning of the semester, actually even before the semester, because I wanted to get a snapshot of where students were for the skills and knowledge I knew, the standards that they'd be learning in Unit 3, which features Hamlet. So you can see we have these standards, and there's a label with it, Unit 3 pre-assessment. Once again, these do not count towards the student's final grade. They're at the beginning of the semester. The kid is just learning how to approach these standards, so it's not fair to nail them right off the bat. However, what these numbers do is provide us with important feedback and data. In this case, you know, the student is actually doing pretty well as we get into Act 1 with Shakespeare. Shakespeare is hard. Okay, let's make no doubt about it, okay? But you can see it's a 3.65. It's approaching a 4. And that means that student is almost meeting the standard when it comes to comprehending Shakespeare, or a certain percentage out of the assessment we give. Now, it does calculate this percentage, which I don't like. Once again, people are focused on the grade. A 3.65 out of 5 is not a C. It means it's approaching the standard, but Pearson PowerSchool insists on giving you a percentage and a grade. So my suggestion is if it makes you feel any better, parents, just take a sticky note or a piece of tape and block that out right there. It's the system we've grown up with, is that grades and averaged points and stuff, and that does not have any correlation to learning. Very seldom in the conversation does the question come, what did you learn after what grade did you get? Okay, once we talk about grades, learning usually stops. So these are formative assessments. Okay, they're always out of quintiles, and they always do not count towards the grade. But the other type of assessment does count, and these are summative assessments. And you can see right down here, Hamlet, Act 3, reading quiz, or assessment, I should say. This student was approaching the standard. They kind of struggled, and then by the time the third week rolled around, I felt it was a good time to have a summative assessment. Show me what you've learned, kid. And this student got an 8.6 out of 10, 86%, okay? And that is a grade that does go into their grading calculation, as you can see up here with the P3 score, okay? This is the only assignment they've had so far this quarter. So these are going to match. Okay, and as more and more assignments come in, they're going to start to average together. That's the default. The average comes into play. But what I did not want to be average was the quintiles. The other, and you may ask yourself, well, how come the S2 score is different from the P3? Well, remember S2 represents all the assignments across the entire semester, and a semester-long, I guess, assignment, if you want to call it, is the timeliness grade. And this is totally separate from the standards-based grades. It's a separate category. I do not want whether a kid turns in a major assignment on time or not to be reflected in penalties on their quintile scores. I feel that just really distorts the meaning of a quintile score, and the kid just has no idea. If they need a couple days to get in a quality assignment that represents their best thinking, that quintile score should represent that. Timeliness is a different category entirely, okay? But it does count for a grade, and effectively it counts for a 10% boost in their grade. So from a purist standpoint, this is not a pure standards-based grade book. But at some points we do have to hand out grades, and so I wanted a nice little buffer there, because the only grade that really counts for anything so far that's academic, in this case, was this Hamlet Act 3 reading quiz. Okay? Now, you may also notice there's this other part of the progress report, which is these category averages. This is something that is not very useful at all. It represents an average of points. Once again, we're not dealing with points, but quintiles for the most part. And I just encourage you to ignore it. It is, once again, something that we could not get rid of. But once again, we do need data, and this is the system we've got. And so hopefully things will change in the future, but we've just got to work with what we're working with right now. So when you look at your kids' progress report, these are the numbers that matter. What grade are they getting in this class? This, okay? But the more important part is, how do you see your kid progressing across time with these quintile scores? Are they gaining ground? Are they improving? And if they are, that's something they can talk about. Like, look, I really struggled, early on with that writing standard 5, but, maybe in 3 weeks or 6 weeks or 9 weeks, we're going to have another assignment that addresses that standard, or at least that strand of writing in the Common Core, and the student will be able to show growth. That's the idea. And so the focus is on learning, not on grades. Once again, if you have any questions or concerns, always reach out to me. Here's my information up here, my email address and my number. And before I let you go, this is a big shift for everybody. This is the system I grew up learning. This is not the system I grew up learning in school. This is definitely not the system you did or my grandparents. And so, but we want to focus on the learning here at La Jolla High School, not so much the specific grades. And of course, grades are important for their own reasons. But I think your students are going to be much happier if they have a specific idea where they stand and how they can improve, rather than something that's totally inflated beyond all recognition. So sometimes the vocabulary we use is really important. So instead of talking about grading, talk about assessment. Oh, so you didn't do very well in this assessment. How do you plan to improve? Instead of their score, let's assess them. Everything is feedback. Everything is just designed to give them a place to start and where they want to go. We're not here to judge or criticize people and make people feel bad. It's just like the data my scale gives me is not in any way tainted by judgment. It's just telling me, hey, Glenn, if you want to lose 20 pounds, here's where you are, and here's where you need to go. Okay? And we're talking not so much about grades, but about the standards. Are we proficient or are we mastering them? And so it's a real shift, and I appreciate your patience with this process. I think ultimately this is going to lead to a better school culture and happier students and more effective teaching. And that's what we're all here for, hopefully. And in addition to getting good grades and getting into those top-notch schools. So, if you have any questions, let me know, and hopefully I will see you soon.